Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial by IcyZIinX. Today I will be doing a not so quick, but hopefully not too long tutorial on sniping as many of you have asked for. For those of you who have commented on my previous videos to ask for this tutorial, thank you for giving me that suggestion. And for those of you who just have been supporting me in general and my ventures on YouTube, I really appreciate it. And it really means a lot to me. So thank you guys so much for that. In today's video, obviously, I will be doing something very different. There will not be any background music for you to enjoy apart from my wonderful voice. Um, so I'll do my best not to bore you. And today's video will be a little long, so please bear with me. And in the end of the day, I hope you guys find this informative and find it useful and helpful with regards to what you want to see, and specifically with regards to how to become a better sniper player. So in this video, I'll quickly run through some of the important things that I think you should know about sniping. Along the way, I'll obviously give you some tips as well with regards to how you can improve your sniping. But most importantly, this video will focus on three things. The first is mouse sensitivity. The second will be calibrating the center of your screen. And the last thing would be which type of sniping style to employ. So I will separate these three things according to the chapters in the video. So please feel free to skim through to whichever part you wish to focus on. And with that, let's get straight into the first part, which is your mouse sensitivity. Right. So for mouse sensitivity, there are a few things that you need to know, right? You can either choose whether you want to be a high sensitivity player or you want to be a low sensitivity player. So what does that mean, right? A high sensitivity player is someone who is able to cover a very large amount of the map, or basically shift from left to right with very minimal effort, right? Meaning to say that you don't really need to move your hand. As long as you turn your wrist from left to right, you're actually going to cover a very large portion of the map, right? So the advantage of that is obviously your coverage of the map is a lot better, meaning to say that if you're facing here and somebody pops out from here, you're going to be able to make that switch very, very easily, right? It's literally not even going to require you to move your mouse much from left to right. You can literally just tilt your wrist left and right, as I'm doing right now. And obviously mine is not enough because my sensitivity is, as you can see, 22 and 33. But I used to play at 164, right? And I'll show you what that looks like. And I'm going to do that same movement, and you can see the difference. Right? I can literally swing almost 180. Wait, not even almost 180 degrees. Let me try that again. Yeah. So I'm going to face here, right? And I'm going to just tilt my mouse. Yeah, I can literally almost turn 360 degrees just by turning my wrist from left to right. I'm not even moving my mouse across the surface of the mouse pad, right? So this is considered a high sensitivity, and what I'm currently playing is 22, which you can see is a drastic difference from what it used to be. I'm still able to turn 180, 360, not really possible. But I'll get to why I dropped my sensitivity. So in the past, I realized that when I was playing on higher sensitivity, yes, I was able to do these kind of crazy shots where I would just flick my mouse across and easily I'll not even flick my mouse across, literally just turn my wrist a little bit and I'll be able to make these crazy shots, right? Which people go like, oh my god, that's ridiculous. But the truth is that happens maybe about 2 to 5% of the time that you're playing the game, right? The remaining 90 odd percent of the time, the chances are a person is going to appear in front of you or somewhere in your field of vision, right? Which means you want to have a certain amount of stability. So the problem with a high sense is that when you set your sensitivity to its highest or to a higher sensitivity, while you have greater coverage of the map, you definitely have reduced accuracy. And especially if you have shaky hands or anything like that, right? You're a little anxious or you're a little nervous or whatever it is, there's a very high chance that you won't be able to have a stable aim. What do I mean by that? So if my sensitivity is very low, then any minor movements in my hand, right? As you can see, I'm moving a little bit from left to right, just stimulating a little bit of a of a of a handshake, like when my hands are a little bit shaky, this is what happens. But if I do it at a higher sense, that movement is going to be so much more pronounced. Can you see? It's so much more pronounced, right? So the bottom line is, if you're playing at a lower sense, you're going to get a lot more stability, right? But at the expense of coverage, of course, meaning to say that you'll need to move your mouse a lot more in order to turn a wider range, right? So how do I then choose my mouse sensitivity? So for those of you who are wondering, I'm currently playing at 1400 dpi, and as you can see, my mouse and zoom sensitivity are 22 and 33 respectively. So with regards to sensitivity, there are two ways that you can change it. You can either change it in game, or you can adjust it in your mouse software, depending on what mouse brand you're using and what software it comes equipped with. So I would personally recommend tweaking the settings from the Blackshot window itself in game. And the reason why I say that is because you want to keep one of the settings constant, right? If you keep toggling between mouse settings in both areas, then you're not going to be able to kind of, control for a variable. So when we have two variables, ideally, if you want to have full control over the situation, you want to keep one of them constant so you can play around with the other one. So for me, I keep my DPI the same, right? I don't make any changes out of Blackshot. So with regards to sensitivity, I only make changes here. So how did I get to 22 and 33? And I'm not saying that 22 mouse sense and 33 zoom sense is the ideal setting that you should try to achieve, or you should follow me and use these exact settings. Personally, I would say that mouse sensitivity is really down to your comfort and what you're trying to achieve. You need to understand that there are going to be trade-offs for both of them. Ask yourself, what type of sniping, what kind of style do you have? Are you the kind of person who's very conservative? Are you the kind of person who would literally wait here for 2 minutes for your opponent to pop out and just get one kill? Or are you the kind of person who likes to go aggro, run into your opponent's base and kill all the people inside there, right? Of course, I think if you're more aggressive, a higher sensitivity might be useful because that'll allow you to get a wider coverage. But at the same time, bear in mind that too high a sensitivity comes at the cost of accuracy. So I would suggest finding a sensitivity that allows you to turn 180 degrees, right, while moving your mouse from left to right or from right to left, depending on how much of space you have with your mouse pad. So for me, I have a larger mouse pad, the kind that covers my keyboard and my mouse alike. So it does give me a lot of space, and it does give me a lot of let's call it runway for me to move my mouse and drag my mouse up and down, left and right. So 22 and 33 kind of are good as, okay, 22 actually. We'll not talk about 33 now because zoom sense is a different thing altogether. A mouse sense of 22 with 1400 DPI on my mouse allows me to get a right balance, I feel, between sensitivity in terms of having good coverage at the same time having decent stability, right? Zoom sensitivity very quickly then, before we end off this chapter on sensitivity, is basically how much your mouse moves. Sorry, not how much your mouse moves. How much your scope moves when you move your mouse left and right. So it's when you're scoped in. So zoom sensitivity has no bearing on other weapon types. Specifically for sniping, when you scope in and move it left to right versus when you unscope and you move it left to right, right? That's the difference between zoom sense and your mouse sense. So this is once again a personal preference for me. I tend to keep my zoom sense slightly higher than my mouse sense because there are times where I feel like if I'm turning, right, and I see somebody pop up at the corner of my screen, let's say, look at this sign over here, yeah? All right, let's say I'm looking over here and suddenly somebody pops up here, right? So as you can see how I quickly just dragged my mouse across, right? If my zoom sense was the same as my mouse sense, I would need to move it exactly this much in order to face this sign, right? But if my zoom sense is higher, it'll be a little less effortful. So I'm able to kind of make quicker drag shots like this, right? As opposed to it being a little bit slower. So to me, a higher zoom sense can kind of help to compensate a little bit for a lower mouse sense. But that being said, this is still a lot of practice, right? You still need to kind of get a little bit of practice in, give yourself a lot of time, obviously, to get used to how much your mouse moves under the zoom and how much your screen, your gun, not your screen, how much your gun moves with regards to an unscoped position and in a scoped position, right? If your mouse and zoom sense are different. If you choose to keep both of them the same, then the good news is you're going to be able to very conveniently identify how much you need to move your mouse from left to right in order to pan a certain distance, regardless of whether you're scoped in or not, right? and I have a friend who does play on those settings, and he's a very good sniper player. I'm just not going to name him at this point, but he does use the exact same sensitivities for mouse and zoom, which in his words helps him because it gets you very comfortable with how much you need to turn your mouse to pen a certain amount of distance, regardless of whether your scope is zoomed in or not. So the advantage of that is that it doesn't really make any difference if you swing before you quick scope or you open your scope and drag to your target, right? Because it's going to be the same amount of movement that's required to cover that distance. So that is, in a nutshell, what zoom sense and mouse sense are. The next thing we're going to talk about is centering of your screen. Okay guys, so for the calibration of the center of your screen. Now, the first thing you need to know is that how accurate your quick scopes are is largely dependent on one thing, which is how similar is your perception of the center of your screen, which means where do you perceive the center of your screen to be just by looking at the screen at this point, versus where the actual or true center of the screen is. All right. So what is the true center of the screen? So the true center of the screen in Blackshot will basically be where your scope will appear when you right click holding a sniper, right? This is the true center of your screen. So if you look somewhere to your right and you scope in, this exact spot is the true center of your screen. Now, when you're scoped in, obviously it's not a problem, right? Because you can see this is where the center of the screen is. But if I unscope it and I move one round and I come back here, how do I now perceive where the center of my screen is, right? Is it still at the exact same spot? Is it slightly higher? Is it slightly lower? So to demonstrate, I will use this target right in the center here, all right? The one that I'm looking directly at. So before I do it, right, I'm going to ask you, if my sniper is now in this current position, where do you think the scope is going to be if I right click? Is it going to be above the target? Is it going to be below the target, on the target, to the left, to the right? Just form this impression. Just imagine in your mind for a moment where you think the scope is going to be. I have a rough idea of where the scope is going to be, right? But I'm not going to say it, right? So hold that imagination, and now I'm going to open the scope. All right. So for me, I perceived the scope to be somewhat to the right side of the center of this target, which is pretty much where the scope actually is. Is it exactly where I thought it would be? Maybe not exactly, but somewhere there, right? Ultimately, it's still on the target, right? How do I know that it is going to be on the target? That is really because after years and years of playing this game, I have kind of been able to calibrate my perception of where the center of the screen is to the true center of the screen, right? Which means that when I hold a sniper upright like this, I roughly have an idea of where the scope is going to open up, right? And as you play and over time, as you practice and give yourself the time, obviously, you will get better at doing this, meaning to say that you will start getting closer and closer to where the center of the screen actually is supposed to be. So now let's say I'm going to shift to this target, right? And I want to aim the head of this target. I'm going to do something like this. So as you can see, I kind of got it close again, right? It's a little bit more to the left, right? And slightly higher, but where I'm aiming is still essentially the head of the target, right? So this is what the center of the screen is, right? And I am using no additional softwares or aiming assistance at this point, right? Now, this is obviously something that I cannot tell you how to do straight away. It's not to say like, okay, position your mouse at this angle, aim at 45 degrees, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't work that way. It's really based on your ability to play long enough and know where your scope is going to be, right? One way of getting a reference is if you switch out to your melee and you get the crosshair out, and then you switch back out to your sniper, that will be the exact spot where the sniper is aiming, right? But more often than not, you'll be moving around with your sniper, and you can't keep doing that, right? You can't keep taking out your knife and looking at the target before you take a shot. So over time of with playing, you'll come to realize that you'll get better at understanding where the center of the screen is, or at least perceiving where the center of the screen is to be. And even if it is slightly off, it'll still be on the target, hopefully. The problem with most of us who are new to sniping is that we have zero perception of where the center of the screen is, right? Look, the person comes out, let's say the person is going to be this target, right? But we might be aiming here, right? When we see the guy and then we're like, oh, but the person is over here and we've missed by so much. But for me, I roughly know that if, let's say I'm aiming here and the person, okay, now see the person's coming out here, right? I roughly know that at this point, I'm already aiming the target, right? Slight minor adjustments, I can definitely make it on the fly. So if let's say the person comes out and I'm about to shoot and he jumps, I can drag it, right? That's what the zoom sense that I spoke about in the previous chapter is about, right? But for those of you who are struggling with this, there's an easier way that you can kind of know where the center of your screen is. Back in the day, many of the older players, before technology was as advanced as it is today, many of us used to use, I wasn't one of these people, by the way, but people used to use blue tack, right? They would stick a piece of blue tack or something sticky in the middle of the screen. So they'd open the scope, then they would stick a little piece of blue tack exactly where the scope is at this point, right? And then you unscope. So now that blue tack is always going to be at the center of your screen, right? The problem with that is you have to stick something artificial and some foreign object on your screen, which is not very, very aesthetically pleasing. And, well, it's a little bit logistically taxing, if I may put it that way. So a lot of monitors today come with a function that allow you to input a crosshair or put a dot on the center of your screen. So now I've turned on the dot. You won't be able to see it, but take my word for it. I have turned it on now. And this will allow me to actually understand where the center of my screen is. So if I'm aiming this target here, right, which is a closer target, check this out. I'm going to scope in. Okay, I'm going to show you a demonstration, right? I'm going to scope in on the head of all 4 of these targets one by one, right? And there you have it. That in itself is a clear demonstration that I now have got a perfect sense of calibration between my perception of the center of the screen and the true center of the screen, right? And obviously that's possible because I have a little dot in the center of my screen thanks to my monitor. And a lot of us may have monitors with this function, and I don't really think there's anything wrong with using them. Personally, if you ask me, I think there are pros and cons to it. So the pro is obviously that it helps you align with the true center of the screen, which means your quick scopes become a lot more accurate. But at the same time, I feel that it also fixates your attention on that center and kind of takes away your peripheral vision because you're just focusing on that dot, right? And that's not always good. As a good sniper player, I think what's important is you need to be scanning around the map, right? So even though I'm looking straight, my eyes need to be looking at the target on my left and I need to be scanning on my right as well. So if a person comes out, I can do something like that, right? If the dot is there, I'm just going to be fixated on the center and I'm not really going to be paying as much attention as I probably should be to my left and my right, or my top and bottom, whatever it might be. So take the whole dot with a pinch of salt. I think there are some people who think that it's a cheat code or a hack, and truth be told, I don't think it is. There are a lot worse hacks that are currently being used, I believe. So this is not really a hack. I think it is just a way to help you practice and get better at understanding where the center of your scope is. The only disadvantage with using such a thing and becoming reliant on it is that when you are put in a situation like in an offline tournament or something where you don't have that, you're going to struggle a lot. So what I will say is you can use it a little bit. Like for me, if I use a sniper that's new, like for me when I use AWPs, I am quite comfortable with where the scope is going to be, right? But when I use an MSR or something different, it takes me a little bit of getting used to. So maybe I'll play the first game or maybe just 5 minutes with the little dot on in the middle of the screen. And after that, I switch it off because that has already allowed me to kind of psychologically like have this impression of where the center of the screen is. So I already have this perception of where the center of the screen is, and I don't really use it anymore because I feel that my sniper actually does a bit better. It may not be as accurate, but it's definitely a lot more versatile when I have the aiming assistance off actually. So make what you will out of that. I don't think it's a hack or a cheat code. If it works for you, it works for you. But all I would say is just be a bit careful and try not to get over reliant on it. So why does the center of the scope matter, right? Because in Blackshot, the most important thing is you have to let your scope fully engage in order for the shot to be accurate. So let's say I'm aiming this yellow paint marking, right? The middle of this yellow paint marking on the wall. If the scope opens fully and I shoot it, right? The bullet lands exactly where I'm aiming. But if I unscope it without moving my sniper at all, logically the bullet should still land at the same spot. But what's going to happen here is that when I take a quick scope, when I take a no scope, you can see that the bullet lands above the marking. So there is no logic There is no logic in the mechanics of no scopes in this game, right? That attributes to why many of you miss your quick scopes. Because when you don't allow the scope to fully engage, right, this is what happens. That is what happens when I right click and left click as fast as I possibly can. It doesn't imply that I have an accurate shot. So sniping is about balancing the speed with the accuracy as well. You need to know how fast is the gun that I'm using. Like how fast is this gun actually, right? Like it's not about the fast, your ability to right click and left click as fast as possible. That's not going to translate into an accurate shot. What's going to translate to accurate shot is my sniper capable of dealing with that speed at which I left and right click? I mean, I right and left click, right? So for a sniper like this, you can see if I do it too fast, it's not landing accurately, right? I've got to slow it down a little bit. That's better, right? So if I use a slower sniper to illustrate, like a M24 Golden Star, and I just click as fast as I can, right left. Okay, that was pretty accurate. So you can see here, it's going all over the place, right? With the exception of 1 or 2 shots, let the scope fully engage and then take the shot. So engage, and then take the shot, right? So don't panic. I know it's natural that sometimes if somebody jumps out, you just do that, but you gotta relax. Let the scope fully engage, and that's why the higher tier weapons are actually more advantageous, because your scope engagement speed is a lot quicker, meaning to say that the time taken for the scope to fully engage is almost instant, right? For 6-star snipers, I believe it would be immediate, so the moment you right click, the scope is fully out. But for 5-star snipers, there actually is a slight delay, right? A very, very minor delay. I wouldn't even say it's 1 second. It's probably like in the milliseconds kind of thing, right? But nevertheless, you still have to let the scope fully engage before you take the shot, because if you don't, it's essentially going to be a no scope, which means the bullet's going to fly. God knows where it's going to fly, right? So that's the second tip that I have, guys. Give yourself the time to practice. If you have some of these aiming assistance features on your monitor, or you use some sort of aiming assistance programs, right? As long as they're not hacks, right, or hack files that do the work for you, right? I wouldn't necessarily say that these things are considered hacks or cheats, right? They're just helping you to center your perception. And my advice would be, don't get too reliant on these things, right? Because at the end of the day, I would rather kill 5 people knowing that these 5 kills were my work and like I genuinely made those kills on my own merit, than using some sort of aim lock or hack program or whatever it is that's going around these days to get 50, 60 kills, knowing that actually deep down it's not my own ability, right? I don't have the ability to do this, right? So I would advocate for you taking pride in what you are doing, right? Don't mask, right? Or don't use another program or a software or a cheat or a hack or whatever, right? And then cheat yourself and make yourself feel like, oh, I'm very good. Because at the end of the day, you're only cheating yourself, right? Let's be really honest with you. The good snipers, we know how to tell when somebody is a little too good for their own well-being. Let me put it that way, all right? I can't be sure and I can't make any judgment, right? I'm not going to accuse anybody at this point. But what I'm saying is, the good snipers, we miss our shots too, right? There is nobody who can cleanly hit 100% of the shots that they take. I can promise you that, right? We do miss a lot of shots as well. You just don't see them. But what does help reduce the number of shots that you miss is getting a good understanding of where the center of your screen is. So work on that. Practice. If you don't have any assistance programs, that's perfectly fine. I spent 8 years, 9 years playing this game without any of such things. And I don't even use it till today. Like, I have used it once or twice a little bit just to kind of recenter my screen, recalibrate my center of the screen when I use a different weapon. But when I'm playing the game, I really find myself preferring to play without that assistance thingy, right? It kind of gets in my way. It kind of forces my attention to a certain part of the screen, which I don't think is favorable for a sniper. So ultimately, it's your decision to make if you want to use these things, but I would say don't allow yourself to get too reliant on these things. So yep, that is for calibration of the center of your screen. And for the last part, we're going to talk about what type of sniping style to employ. Alright guys, so for the final part of this video, I will very quickly tell you about the different types of sniping styles that you can adopt, and probably when you should use each of the following styles. So there are three predominant styles that you see. So we have the pre-scope, we have the quick scope, and we have the no scope. So for the pre-scope, it basically means you're opening up the scope prior to seeing your enemy because you're expecting them to come out from a certain part of the map. So you're going to open up your scope and you're going to wait, right? You're going to open up your scope and wait for the person to come out, and then when the person does come out, you take it, right? The quick scope is when you're moving around without the scope being in. Without the scope being activated, right? So without being scoped in. And when you see the person pop up, just reduce my volume a little bit, right? So when you see the person pop up, you do a quick right click and a quick left click following that, right? Of course, waiting for the scope to engage fully as we spoke about earlier, and also at the same time, bearing in mind the whole center of the screen thing, right? So this technique of sniping is obviously very useful when you have a very good sense of where the center of your screen is. For those of you who are new to sniping, the biggest issue will be that you don't know how to accurately sense where the center of your screen is, right? Basically, it means that you won't know where your scope is going to open at any given point that you're facing, right? So that is something that you obviously have to get better with time, or as I said previously, if you have a aiming aid that's activated on your screen, that might probably help. So you can actually move around, and then when the target pops up, you take a quick shot. That's a quick scope, right? The last one is a no scope. So a no scope basically means that you take a shot. You should basically do a left click without using the right click at all, right? And when is the no scope useful? Very seldom, right? To be very honest with you, I feel like a no scope will probably be used only like less than 2 or 3% of the time, right? Most of the time you'll be using either pre-scopes or quick scopes, right? So let's start off with pre-scopes, right? There's a big stigma that surrounds pre-scoping where people like to scold you for saying, oh, you're preing. My personal advice would be ignore those people, right? Because at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with using a pre-scope. If it was that easy and it was that straightforward and easy, guaranteeing you a kill, I don't see why everybody isn't doing it, right? If they can diss you for pre-scoping, they could probably do the same, right? So don't let anybody get you pressured into doing only quick scopes, because let's be honest, that is completely ridiculous, right? If I knew, right, that there was an enemy, let's say behind these set of tires, and he was going to come out from the right side, right? If let's say I see him there, right? Why would I wait for him to pop up and then try to do this when I can literally do this, and when he pops up makes it so much easier for me to get the kill, right? So the pre-scope is very useful specifically in certain modes, I would say, like especially if you're playing search and destroy, where you're trying to mark a certain entry point into a bomb site, or if let's say you know that somebody's going to come in to take your flag, why not just mark the flag like this, right? Crouch at an angle, keep yourself covered while watching for the target to appear where you've opened your scope, right? It sounds very easy, but truth be told, it's actually quite difficult, right? And the reason for that is very simple, because when people expose usually to check corners, they do it very explosively. Seldom you see them walking out to expose into a corner, right? So let's say now, to give you an example, let's say there's a sniper marking this spot over here, right? And then I am the player that is behind this wall, right? And I'm going to come out here. So let's say there's a sniper over there, right? Marking me here, right? Let me illustrate that. There's a sniper over there, and I am standing here, right? So the sniper is marking this angle. So the moment I pop up from behind this wall, he's going to take a shot at me, right? Most players will probably, if they're using rifles, what they do is they would spray as they come out, right? Or they would come out and they would spray immediately, right? Or they would jump out and start shooting, right? So all of these things, right, actually make it harder for you as a sniper, because when the bullet hits you while your scope is open, right, the screen's gonna shake, right? So that's bad, right? You're not going to be able to hit an accurate shot. So how do you kind of combat against this? There are two ways. The first way is to keep it really, really tight. Alright, so you're marking a very, very tight gap here, right? Which means that it's going to make it very hard for the opponent to actually accurately land a rifle shot on you as they come out from behind that corner. The problem with this is that your gap or your window of opportunity is really, really small, which means if the person runs across without even using a speed kit or jumps across chances are you're not going to be able to take the shot. You'll be able to see that the person is crossed, but you're like, okay, now the person's on the right side, right? Then you might feel compelled to open up and try and peek, but that's a bad thing because it exposes you to a very, very wide angle, right? So with sniping and using the pre-scope, there's a lot of brains that is involved actually, right? In order to be effective and good at it, marking angles, you got to pick your spot well. So how do you choose a spot that's good? I would say a general rule of thumb would be to make sure that no more than half of your body is being exposed, right? If you are standing, like, it would make no sense if you stood here and pre this spot when you could actually do it from here, right? Well, let's see, maybe you can even do it from here. Okay, no, maybe not. Yeah, no, I can't get that angle, but we'll do it from here, right? So the first thing I would say is strategically choose your location, right? It's not so straightforward as, oh, you're preing, right? Honestly, if you stood here and I was marking that door and I stood right in the open, it would make it easy for a rifler to take me down, right? But if, let's say, I was marking that same door, but I did it like this, right? It's going to be a lot harder. Or maybe if I did it like this, right? Give them a little bit of space so when they first come out, they don't see me. But after they pass, that's when I get a window to shoot, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it with the pre-scopes, I would say. You have to be patient in order to hit a pre-scope, right? And at the same time, you have to be pretty sharp, to be honest, right? Especially if you're preing a tighter gap. The smaller the gap is, the quicker your reactions need to be, right? So don't be too ambitious and say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna hit this shot, right? And just do something like this. I will tell you, I have hit shots like this before with this kind of gap, right? But it's probably 1 in 10 attempts, right? Be a bit realistic and really ask yourself, how much of space do I actually need, right? You don't need the entire thing, but maybe something like this, yeah? And you can try to alternate between whether you stand, whether you crouch. Crouching is particularly useful to avoid headliners, so some people are really good at headlining. Sadly, if the person is using a wall hack or something, then you're probably dead anyway because they know exactly where you are. But for clean players, right, assuming we're up against a clean person, right, the rifle players who are very good at headlining would actually roughly know how to position their crosshair on your head level if you're standing up. So when you crouch or when you take different angles, right, it kind of makes it a little bit harder for them to do that. So that is something you can do, right? When do you use a quickscope? To be honest, a quickscope is just useful when you are kind of being aggressive, right? When you're running around, right? If you're marking a certain angle, I would say stick to the pre-scope. If you're attacking a certain side, let's say you're running in to try and flag, right? You put a speed kit, you go into the flag room, you're going to take the flag, let's say the flag is here, right? You're going to take the flag, somebody comes out from behind the wall, or let's say you take the flag and then you get shot, you need to spin around and quickly take a quick scope, right? You've got no time to go to another angle and like open up your scope and try and pre, it's not going to work, right? It's basically when you're on the fly. So when you're on the move and something happens and somebody pops up unexpectedly, that's when you do a quick scope. So for the purposes of hitting accurate quickscopes, as I said, you need to have your center of your screen. Your perception of the center of the screen needs to be quite good, right? Whether using an aiming aid or not, that's secondary. The bottom line is you need to know where the center of your screen is in order to be a good quickscoper, right? And that is something that takes time and takes practice. The other thing that you need to know is that don't panic and do a right and left click way too quickly, because then the bullet goes God knows where it went, right? Be composed as you do a quickscope. Make sure that as you practice, the bullet mark appears exactly where your scope opens up to be. If it doesn't land there, then you know that you're too fast and it's landing somewhere else. Right? So the quick scope looks cool, but I would say that if you keep forcing yourself just to do quick scopes all the time, it's not really practical, not really the most effective use of your bullets as well, right? So just weigh out your options is what I'm saying. The final thing we'll talk about is the no scope. So when do you use a no scope? A no scope is basically reserved for situations where you find yourself in a very close proximity battle, which let's say there is somebody behind this wall over here, okay? Or let me illustrate it with this bunch of tires, right? No scopes, as we saw earlier, if I stand somewhere here, right, and if I scope in, right, it's supposed to hit exactly on this spot, right, where you can see, wait, is there a bullet mark here? No, there isn't. Let me find a surface with a bullet mark. Okay, here, right? So let's do it here. So if I scope in and shoot, that's where the bullet's supposed to land. But if I do a no scope, you can see it landed on top, right here. The good news is, or the bad news is, that is how Blackshot system is, right? So there's nothing we can do to change that. But the good news is, if you're relatively close enough to the target, right, let's say this close, your no scope will probably end up hitting the target, even though it's not consistently hitting the same spot. As you can see, that's an even weirder thing, right? With my sniper facing this exact same direction, and I take 2 different shots and they have just landed at 2 different points. But the advantage is if the opponent or the enemy is directly at the barrel of your sniper and they're covering the entire barrel, like this dude over here, a no-scope will end up hitting him at some part of the body, right? So when do you use your no-scopes is when, let's say, you're running around and then all of a sudden somebody just jumps out from behind this wall and you're like, whoa, right? That's when you just pull off a no-scope, right? Because the distance is there, right? The distance isn't there, right? It is so close that the chances are that the bullet will end up hitting the person because they're literally right in front of you. The advantage of the no-scope then is there's no need for you to waste time scoping in, because that may actually make the difference between whether you're able to take 1 shot or 2 shots, right? So let me try and show that again. If you want to scope in when the guy is really close, right, versus if you don't, oops, sorry. Right, so if I take 2 successive shots versus if I just do this, right? Try that one more time. So 2 successive scope shots versus 2 no scopes. And you can see that the 2 no scopes are obviously going to be a bit quicker because it saves you that extra second as you wait for the scope to fully engage, right? The good news is if you have a natural reflex and somebody jumps out and your first reaction is to just right click and left click as fast as you possibly can, the good news is that it will still register as somewhat of a no scope, right? Because the scope didn't fully engage, which also means you'll probably hit the target. But why put yourself through the trouble of scoping in when you can just do that, right? So yeah, these are predominantly the 3 types of sniper shots that you can use. And if you ask me, is there a hard and fast rule for which to use when? I wouldn't really say it's hard and fast, obviously. If you're interested to try and hit a no-scope from here while the opponent is right over there, good luck to you. It's possible. By some stroke of luck, you'll probably get it. But I would say, be realistic about it. Be pragmatic about it. It's cool to be quick scoping all the time, but look, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the most effective way of using your sniper. So, the final thing, obviously, as I said before, as I want to say before we wrap up this video, it's been quite a long video, so thanks for bearing with me this far if you have, is why do I switch my weapon? Now, this is something that most of you probably will already know, but in case there's anybody who doesn't know, right? If let's say I scope in, take a shot, and wait for the hand animation to, basically to pull the bolt, and recharge for the next bullet to fire itself again, I'm wasting more time, right? A faster way for me to actually do this is to switch to my pistol or my knife and back up to my sniper again. So shoot instead of this. So as you can see, the time taken for me to shoot a second bullet is literally halved when I switch to my pistol and back up to my sniper again. So how do you do that? For me personally, I use the mouse scroll wheel, so I scroll down and scroll back up, right? Some people like to use the number key, so 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Usually 1 and 2, or more commonly, people use the letter Q, right? Q for Q back, right? Q. So the Q button basically switches between 2 of your last selected weapons. So if I go to my knife and back to my sniper, Q will go to my knife, and Q again will go back to my sniper. So if I take a shot and I hit QQ, and I shoot QQ, and then QQ again. So each time I press Q, it will switch to my last selected weapon. Right? Which is the best method? It's really down to your personal preference. I've been using the mouse scroll for the longest time, so I have not bothered trying QQ. I occasionally use the 1 key while I'm in game. If let's say I want to go to my nade from here, rather than scrolling down 4 clicks, if I want to take out my nade, I'll just press 4, get my nade out, right? But most of the time when I'm in the combat situations and I'm sniping, it's really just scrolling down to my pistol and back up to my sniper again, right? So you can use Q, you can use scroll, you can use 1, 2, 3, 4, whichever it is you're most comfortable with. So don't change that just because I'm using my scroll, right? Find what's most comfortable for you, find what's quickest for you, and then use that. So yep, that kind of wraps up the tutorial. I hope that you guys have learned something at least. For those of you who have stuck through, I thank you for bearing with me. It has been quite tiring, to be honest. But I've been very happy to do it as well, since a lot of you have actually asked for it. So I really hope that through this video, I have delivered what you guys have asked for. As I said, with anything that you do, I think it's always about giving yourself the time to practice and being patient with yourself as you get better. There will be days where you feel like you're regressing or you're just not having as good a day as before. And I'll tell you one thing with sniping, guys. This like consider this like the uh the end note that I'm leaving for you is that sniping is not always as glamorous as it seems. What you see on YouTube are obviously the better moments, but sometimes sniping is really really difficult, and it can be particularly stressful when you end up tagging an opponent, which means to say when you shoot and the bullet hits the person but the person doesn't die, right? Then you probably have to try to switch out and switch back to your sniper again, or use your pistol to finish the person off, right? And sometimes if you're playing against tougher opponents, in that time the person might rifle you down, right? And it's annoying, and it's really, really annoying when that happens, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is that sniping is nice. It looks cool, definitely. It's why I love it so much. But just bear in mind that sometimes it could be a little bit disadvantageous, right? So don't force yourself, right? Don't force yourself to use a weapon that you find things not working out with. Of course, I'm not saying that you should use that as an excuse to quit when the going gets tough, right? So be patient and give yourself opportunities to improve, but also don't be too harsh on yourself on days where you just feel like it's not working, right? Yeah, at least that's what's personally helped me, right? Because one thing I can say for a fact is when you are not in the right state of mind, right, or when you're annoyed, or when you're angry, or when you're frustrated, chances are you'll realize that you're sniping way, way worse. You need to be composed, you need to be relaxed and collected when you're sniping in order for it to be effective, right? So at least that's my personal experience, and that's my personal advice to all of you. So once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I did open this one day sniper just to record this video for you guys. I've been really busy lately, so I haven't had much time to play this game, but I really hope that the video has been informative, and yeah, I hope that you just took away something positively from this. So I hope to see all of you guys in game soon, and stay tuned. I will be back posting my montages as I usually do, once again in the near future. Right, I've already been working on another drop, so please stay tuned for that, and I look forward to going back to those videos. But yes, if you have any other comments or suggestions for any new content, or even feedback on this particular video, please feel free to drop them in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next one.